Are you sick and tired of the entirety of the meta being completely consumed by the bugged Holy Bolts minions build? Are you just sick of walking around waiting for your golem to walk up and smash something? Do you want a build that can actually like run through Helltide and do Nightmare Dungeons very quickly and also do Tree of Whispers very quickly because you need roughly 14 quadrillion gold to do anything? Well, welcome to the Blight Necromancer. This thing is a walking tank of complete I do not give a single and I'm here to party. It's obviously one of like my more favorite builds. It's basically like the proactive version of an Infinimus Necromancer. And it got an incredible amount of tools in season 4 to make it perform at incredibly high levels. Now, keep in mind very quickly, I'm going to have timestamps down to everything below. I'm also going to have a D4 planner that's also going to be linked to the max roll build guide. You are going to see different things in what I'm going to show you right now than that build guide. Why? Because that build guide is the gear in the skill distribution in the Paragon that I wish I could have. And what I have for you right now is what I currently have. I'm a very poor boy. My gear ain't great. You're going to see a Shaco on my head, but I promise you the rest of the stuff that I got going on is basically like Goodwill hand-me-downs that I just said like, that's good enough. And then I went and cleared this tier 80. If there's a bad combination, do you kind of have to fight a little bit? Sure. But let's go ahead and look at just the gameplay of walking through the dungeon and how honey badger of a build Blight is, because you just don't care. You put on your Bone Storm, you stand in the middle and you permanently CC everything, and then they die while you walk away. Now, the primary conceit of a Blight build is that it's a damage over time build. You're going to be stacking a huge amount of damage over time because we actually get to use the cool, unique items that drop in this game that basically every other build says isn't good enough. Did you find a Black River? You get to use it on this build. Did you find Ebon Piercer? Congratulations, you're a Blight Necro now. Did you finally find a Sacrilegious Soul and you're tired of hearing very specifically me saying that's not good enough on minion builds? It is a must-have for this build. You toss this bad boy on and it kills things for you. Now we're going to go ahead and start with the skill tree. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly just because at this point I think you know what the skills do, but I'll give you an idea of why we're picking the things that we are. We're not using a generator to start. Obviously we're maxing out Blight with Blight adds on additional damage. Yes, we want him perfectly balanced. Not only are we going to be able to permanently cast Blight without stopping for a single second, so you don't have to worry about essence, and it feels so good to be able to do that in the Helltide, but we're going to need as many damage multipliers as we possibly can. Damage over time can't crit, so we stack on huge amounts of it to be able to make up for that difference. Hued Flesh is a must-have for the build. The more corpses we have, the more that can be eaten by Black River with Sacrilegious Soul, auto-casting Omega ton like nuke level corpse explosions into the face of monsters while we just sit there spamming Blight. It's basically a one-button build unless you're going sweaty diving into the pit. Obviously, we're using Blighted Corpse Explosion for more damage over time effects here. We are using 3 points into Grim Harvest. That's also going to help us never have to worry about essence issues, because every single time that Black River eats 5 corpses, that is 30 mana that it gives back to you. Sorry, essence. I forgot that we're not playing D2. Obviously, Fueled by Death is an amazing damage multiplier for us. We are going to be picking up just the 1 point into Decrepify. Normally, I'd like to max this out, but considering we have to max out both Blight and Corpse Explosion, we are a little stingy for points here. Obviously, we want to pick up Abhorrent Decrepify, 3 points into Amplify Damage, and then 3 points into Death's Embrace. Just the 1 point into Corpse Tendrils. The amazing amount of plus corpse skills that we're going to get on our gear is going to drastically reduce this cooldown. And not only is that going to give us really good uptime on Vulnerable, but it's going to allow you to stagger pit bosses at incredibly fast rates because your ring is going to autocast it for you and you get to cast it. You get to double down on the pull, the stun, and the slow, which applies an amazing amount of stagger to the boss. And then obviously we want to apply Vulnerable with it. For the passives, if we could find an additional point, I wouldn't mind putting 1 point into Crippling Darkness just to further increase how often we're able to stagger bosses. And there's a universe where I basically, once you have enough essence generation, you can actually take the points out of Grim Harvest here and pick up that 1 point. So don't be surprised if you see that in a different planner as well. Then the 3 points into Gloom and the 3 points into Terra. Bone Storm with the ability to increase your damage reduction. Notice that we don't put the last point into Supreme Bone Storm because we don't care about critting at all. Do we do Shadow Blight damage? Sure. Does that matter? No. Don't put the point in here that allow you to pick up one of the other passives. That's going to be very valuable, most notably the single point into Necrotic Carapace. Now you may think only ever fortifying for 2% of your maximum life doesn't seem really good, but we basically have 100% uptime on Bone Storm. And while we have our barrier active, we're able to maintain our fortified status, and we just have 15% DR the entire time that our barrier is up. One of the biggest selling points of sacrificing all of your minions is the fact that you finally get to put your points into standalone that just says 18% damage reduction. And on top of that, we also get to increase the sacrifice bonuses through Memento Mori. For the gear, yes, I got a Shaco. Yes, I got lucky. I don't know, sue me, all right? Shaco is obviously a great inclusion here. Ironically enough, though, Shaco, while increasing your damage and your survivability, no question there are a lot of great stats and the chance of not being able to fulfill your armor requirements that makes Shaco a little bit of an interesting puzzle piece. Now, I understand that this is a super first world problem, but I could not replace certain pieces of my gear to get stronger pieces on because I couldn't hit my armor requirements because I can't put an armor temper or something like a corpse tendrils or decrepified temper on my hat. Obviously, you will use Shaco. If not, you would be looking for a hat that has intelligence, maximum life, and either armor if you need it, or much more importantly, cooldown reduction. Don't try rolling for cooldown reduction. It is super duper rare to get on it. You just got to pick up a gear piece. Consider just gambling for a helmet until you find some naturally. For the armor, essence per second and corpse explosion ranks are going to be the most important stats, and then either maximum life, armor, or intelligence. You're going to see me putting topazes in a lot of pieces of gear because we want to get as much intelligence as possible because Blight uses Wither. We'll talk about that in the Paragon, but just keep that in mind when you're looking at these stats here. We would love for this to say corpse tendrils radius, decrepify radius, and either maximum life or armor. I have curse duration. Why? Because I bricked this piece of gear, but the stats are too good and I can't ignore it. This is where we're going to be putting Shielding Storm. Shielding Storm is incredibly powerful with Ultimate Shadow to be able to generate all that barrier that you saw me have during that fight. We basically just have barrier the whole time and completely ignore the vast majority of combat's various dangers just by having Ultimate Storm, Shielding Storm on our Bone Storm. Wow, I said storm way too many times there. For the gloves, lucky hit chances pretty decent. You'll see I just have 2 ranks to core skills. I would much rather for this to be plus ranks to Blight, obviously. It's just the best piece of gear that I got. Again, we kind of bricked this one as well. Luckily, I do have a greater affix on intelligence. We rolled with shadow damage over time, which is the offensive temper that you want. And then again, decrepify and corpse tendril size until you reach 100% on both of them. This is where we're going to be putting blighted. Since we can't put this onto a 2-hander or our amulet, it doesn't matter which offensive aspect slot it goes on. For the pants, again, intelligence if you can get it, maximum life, and armor. We don't really care about any of the other like ranks that you could get to skills here. And then total armor if you need it to hit your cap, or maximum life. And then again, the same temper for size. And this is where we're putting hardened bones. Yes, just because I have a Shaco doesn't mean that you can ignore having hardened bones. Could you have a 25% roll and a 20% roll to damage reduction? You're going to take it. Do not sleep on this either. For speed farming earlier on, because you're going to notice that we don't have a mobility aspect here, all the way up to I'd say like tier 60 and even 61 to start getting Neath Iron, you can probably survive without having hardened bones on your gear. So you can instead move the Void Blight Pulls aspect up to your pants and then put Slaughter back on your boots so you can actually move around quickly. For the boots, intelligence, movement speed, and essence per second. This is where we're going to be putting even more movement speed and then either one of the temper sizes that you need. And then like I just explained, we're currently putting Void here. Yes, you need Void. Void is how you just absolutely strong arm every single pack of monsters so that they just can't do anything. They just sit there doing a weird version of the Cha-Cha slide while you melt their faces off with darkness. And then just like, I'm so excited to actually be using unique items. A Black River. Black River is phenomenal. For people who are very new to Black River, what it says is if there are 5 corpses on the ground, whenever you cast Corpse Explosion, it will consume all 5, and it will give you a 520% damage multiplier to that Corpse Explosion. It'll act as consuming 5 corpses for any things that ask for that. Most notably, Flesh Eater node requires you to eat 5 corpses. So one auto cast of Corpse Explosion from our Ring of Sacrilegious Soul will auto proc everything in our build for us. Then obviously the ranks to corpse skills for more damage, ranks to huge flesh to be able to generate more corpses, and then fueled by death for a little bit more damage when you do eat a corpse here. For our weapons, we're obviously going to be putting in damage over time. Technically speaking, we should have close to 100% uptime on vulnerable, and that is a stronger gem for us. But damage over the time does work as a multiplier for our Shadow Blight in the skill tree. It's not that it's super relevant, but I would rather further increase that damage source, which is basically just like free extra damage over time for all intents and purposes, as opposed to getting 2 more additive damage, which would just be a drop in the bucket. Sadly, the effect to increase the radius of Blight's corpse explosion does not work with Black River. It only works on the base corpse explosion, but you can temper on corpse explosion size, which is what I think I currently have on my gloves. It is not important since we pull everything into spots with corpse tendrils in Blight, so don't waste your tempers on that. But for people who wanted to understand how that works, that's how that works. Obviously, the item that's going to pull the build together is Ebon Piercer. This makes it so that whenever you cast Blight, you're also going to cast 4 additional little mini bolts. These mini bolts apply a huge amount of damage over time, and they can shotgun, meaning that your Blight and all 4 of them can hit the target simultaneously. This adds additional damage over time for being able to proc Shadow Blight at incredible rates. Sadly, the additional bolts don't carry lucky hit chance, except for the purposes of generating a corpse. Testing this out, it doesn't proc anything other than Hued Flesh, but what it basically means is that until they fix this bug, Ebon Piercer is an amazing tool for being able to proc a huge amount of corpses, which again feeds into Black River needing 5 corpses every single time that it procs. If you're worrying about masterworking this, I would say the damage reduction and the essence cost reduction are the most important things to hit here. I only call it out on this one piece of gear because they're very obvious that those ones are going to be the best options. And then if you're worrying about what stats are the most important here, the actual damage number, that flat damage number of the effect itself, needs to be at max value. That is the most important thing for this build. For our rings, I haven't quite settled on a good ring. I have intelligence and resource cost reduction. I think I would like attack speed and lucky hit chance here. And then we're going to be tempering on shadow damage over time and resource cost reduction. You could also put on ultimate cooldown. I just don't think that you need it because we have so many overlapping damage over time effects that triggering Decrepify's cooldown reduction is a walk in the park. And then Ring of the Sacrilegious Soul, you can finally use the ding dang thing. You'll notice that I masterwork crit on corpses and I didn't get anything yet. Why? Because you have to upgrade it multiple more times to actually get a plus rank here. But the only things that are really important on this piece of gear are going to be the actual timer, the actual effect down at the bottom that needs to be a minimum roll. Also, just in case you're aware, every single one of those numbers is all tied together. If you get a 1 second on raised skeleton, it's always going to be 1 second on corpse explosion, always going to be 8 seconds on corpse tendrils. Those don't roll individually. Don't worry about trying to hit this like absolute monster of an RNG here. But then corpse skills, followed by lucky hit chance, followed by maximum life. We do not care about essence at all. And then for the offhand, it's like, oh wow, this is a pretty good offhand. It actually isn't that bad. We have a greater affix on cooldown reduction. You absolutely want cooldown reduction here. You absolutely want to be using a focus. Then I would personally have gone with lucky hit chance and resource cost reduction. We got maximum life. And then here we also want to be hitting chance to cast Blight projectiles twice. Because remember, while the Ebon Piercer will make additional bolts, that's not actually another Blight projectile. And the more Blights that we could cast per Blight, and I'm kind of hoping it'll just, there you go, that little extra one that shot out, the faster that you ramp up your damage on your target here. And then we also want the shadow damage over time. And then this is lastly where we're putting damned. If I cast my curse on you, you now just take 1.5 damage. Easy peasy, it's as simple as that. For the Book of the Dead, you're going to be sacrificing Reapers for the additional damage to Shadow. You're going to be sacrificing Cold Mages for the additional damage to Vulnerable. And then you're kind of have your option available here. You can sacrifice Bone for the more attack speed, which is definitely palpable considering we don't have a lot of spots to be able to put attack speed on the gear. Or you can be sacrificing Blood Golem for additional maximum life. On my setup, I'm already close to 32,000 life. So we are definitely tanky enough considering we barrier up to this amount as well. So we effectively have 64,000 life, but more life here is not going to turn down. That's almost 3,000 additional life there, maybe a little bit more. So that's also a really good option in case you don't necessarily care about the very slightly faster animation speed here. For the Paragon, we're going to be focusing on getting as many glyphs activated as possible, hitting a couple legendary nodes, and then hitting as many maximum life and resistance nodes as possible so that we don't have to worry about hitting those on our gear. Starting off with Amplify in the first board to be able to get that 1.1 whenever we cast a curse. Building up into Wither, you're going to see we're going to take this cool little path through on 2 sides because it turns out going through these additive damage nodes here is very inefficient and not particularly valuable for us. It's not terrible, especially while leveling, and you're going to see that during the leveling portion if you go use the build guide on max roll. But later on, you're going to respec into this just to be able to hit like the really key nodes. This is where we're going to put Abyssal just as an additional 1.1 multi, as well as boosting the shadow damage from here, and shadow res to a lesser degree is important. Then we're going to build over into Bone Graft so we can pick up Tenacity and get this huge amount of 14% total maximum life. I just want to show that to you real quick. So right now I have 31,000 life. If I were to take this and take out this little pocket here, I drop down to 27,000 life. It is imperative that you pick up as much maximum life as possible so you can actually survive attacks as opposed to getting one shot. Are you wondering why you're getting one shot? You don't have enough maximum life. In the actual glyph, we're going to be putting Scourge as a minimum investment on int. Yes, it gives us damage over time. That's not super important. It's the 1.1 multi whenever we apply damage over time to our target. Building up into Flesh Eater, this is where we're going to be putting Sacrificial. Again, it's just a magic boost to the nodes here. And then a 1.1 since we don't have any minions, thankfully, on a build with no minions. And then obviously Flesh Eater, which we proc instantaneously every single time that Sacrilegious Soul casts Corpse Explosion for us. Then we're going to be building... Oh, wow. I forgot that I removed this glyph for testing. That's kind of insane. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put on my 20% damage multiplier that I just haven't been using for the past 8 hours of this stream, and I completely forgot about. In the Bloodbath board, you're going to be putting the control glyph. Do I care about healing received? No, it's just the most efficient way to both get the intelligence that you need, as well as a very slight bonus here. We're also going to be picking up Thick Hide for the additional maximum life, and then we're going to sneak over to Suffused Resilience to get that damage taken over time reduction. Yes, this very specifically only works on things like bleed and burning, stuff like that, but how often are you getting absolutely shreked by poison damage whenever spiders explode on you? Pick up Suffused Resilience. What are you doing? Put it into your build. It's good. Building back down into Wither, we're going to be building over here for the Dragging Shadows. This says damage reduction. This says damage reduction from shadow damage over time affected enemies, the longest listed affix in this game, and I was hoping that they would give us a shorthand for this in Loot Reborn, but there it is, 3 paragraphs of a name. This, in combination with the other 3 here, is actually going to get you a total of 14% additional damage reduction. That's why I say this build is so insanely tanky. We have damage reduction coming out of our wazoo. Then we're going to be picking up Restorative for even more maximum life and a little bit of potion healing. Sure, why not? Let's go ahead and talk about Wither. Wither is very straightforward to understand. It effectively allows your damage over time effects to crit. It doesn't make them benefit from crit damage, but what it says is that you have a % chance to increase their damage every single time that they deal damage. It starts off at a base chance of 5 and with a base bonus of 50%, meaning that's a 1.5 multi 5% of the time, which is not great. But for every 60 intelligence that you have, you increase the chance by 1% and the damage by 4%. Luckily, you don't have to do the math here. If you look down there, we currently have a 31% chance. So basically a third of the time we're going to crit, and it's going to multiply your damage over time by 2.54. That's an insane amount of a damage boost. The cool part about it is that it warrants putting more and more and more stats into intelligence. The more that you get, the stronger this is, meaning that you can also very easily hit your armor cap since you're going to have so much elemental resistance from your intelligence that you can then put skulls into your jewelry to be able to replace the armor that you need on gear, to be able to put more affixes on your gear and get even more intelligence. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, the important thing to note is that you do have to hit the breakpoints. It doesn't care if you have 59 intelligence towards the next one, you have to hit 60% intelligence. So if you are ever doing the math, like if I were to sit down and take my 1597 intelligence here and run it through a calculator, let's just do that in real time. We have 1597 divided by 60. I currently have 26 bonuses and I am 60% of the way to the next one. So I need to go pick up another 20 intelligence for all intents and purposes. Let me do that number. That would be 617. Oh, a little bit more, 27. Boom. Okay. So I would need to go pick up another 30 intelligence roughly, and then I would hit the next breakpoint. So just keep that in mind. Take your intelligence divided by 60, and then figure out if you're getting up to a whole number there. And that's when you're going to increase the chance and the damage even further. For the last board, we're going to be picking up even more maximum life Incentive Death. Obviously, we want this legendary node. Then you'll notice that we're picking up Darkness here. The interesting thing about this board is that normally you don't like building over to Deathmarked because it has damage to injured, but because we're a damage over time build, it's going to take you a little bit of time to melt the bosses. Now, you're effectively unkillable while it happens, unless you get into like really high level pits here, but that additive damage is applied for a very long time, and it's just kind of interesting that like full circle on a dot build, you actually care about stats like this. The reason why we're using Darkness, though, is because Darkness is going to give us 10% more damage reduction from targets that are being affected by our shadow damage over time. And the cool part about it is that lasts for 5 seconds, so you can move out of the way. You'll notice that I was kind of like running away from the boss there to avoid things like the Lilith attacks, etc. By the time that you come back, you can still have this damage reduction fully ramped up, so you're not ever like dropping survivability when you need to maneuver through a fight. And congratulations to me, I just completed a pit tier 1. I don't know what that just was, but I am leaving it in this video because I think that it's funny. But that being said, this is the Blight Necromancer. This is one of the things that was easily theorycrafted as going to be one of the strongest builds. And if you notice, the vast majority of minion builds at this point, who are all, again, relying on the Holy Bolt bug to be able to offset a huge amount of like insane damage against bosses, they are all very slowly trying to move over to 1, solve how to apply shadow damage over time fast enough for Shadow Blight, and 2, how to get really good uptime on Blood Mist so that they can actually survive hits. The Blight build kind of does all of that for you while just sitting here literally spamming Blight. It is actually kind of nutty how simple of a build this is to pilot. Again, how good it feels in Hell Tides, which is everybody is just sitting in permanently. The fact that, especially in easier content, you can eschew all of your damage reductions and just put on pure mobility and go blast your way through everything with your amazing amount of just damage reduction from Bone Storm and Shielding Storm. And it feels so good to pilot this thing. If you're brand new here and you're getting done with that minion hype and you're looking for more Necro information, consider subscribing to the channel. I cover every single Necro build every single season. I'm going to play Blight, Sever, Bloodlance, Blood Surge, Thorns, Minions, Shadow Surfer. It's a ultimate Shadow Blood Wave build. Fishy Mancer if you're a D2 vet, Corpse Explosion, plus a minion build. I'm going to be covering all of that here. So subscribe to the channel. You're not going to want to miss it. If you like the videos that you've been seeing, go ahead and drop a like onto this video as well. It helps the algorithm. It helps me out so much. And thank you very much for checking out this video. It really, really means the world to me. As always, leave a comment down below if you have any questions, concerns, comments, ideas, tried out the build in a different way. Want to ask me, is this a minion build? It's a sacrificed minion build, is my new spicy way of saying no, it's obviously Blight. But let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly hope that it helps. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next one.